welcome to our teaching and learning video for today, which is another one of our practice series. And what we're going to be looking at today is this concept of a memory platform. What I'd like to just pose as our initial question of the video today is this: why do we quiz? This is something that as teachers we do quite frequently. We'll often just get a little quiz out, we'll do a quick fire quiz at the start of a lesson, we'll maybe do it at the end, but quizzing is part and parcel of teaching. Why? And what I've given you here is just a little quote from Make It Stick there. Quizzing provides a reliable measure of what you've learned and what you haven't yet mastered. Moreover, quizzing arrests forgetting. Forgetting is human nature, but practice at recalling new learning secures it in memory and helps you recall it in the future. So even if you couldn't answer that question yourself, hopefully that does answer why we quiz. We quiz because it works in getting our kids to actually remember all this stuff we are trying to teach them. Now, obviously, big part of teaching, getting them to remember the stuff. They've got to remember a lot of stuff these days. Let's not kid. There is a whole load of things they just need to memorise. And one of the things I've done in one of my assemblies with the students before is highlight some of these techniques that are effective at helping them to remember their stuff and not so effective. And what we can see, if you have a little look at this table I've extracted from another paper there, is that what we can see the best ones: practice testing and distributed practice. So the kind of things that a lot of our kids tend to do when you ask them, how did you revise? I read my notes. Absolute rubbish, as I tell them too. So what we need to do is try to move them away from these very easy, I would say, revision techniques where they're just going to flick through their book a little bit distracted, probably by a phone at the same time, or they're going to do some lovely highlighting, lots of pretty colours on a page. Not much in terms of the impact, however. We need to be moving them over to this practice testing and the distributed practice ideas. Which brings us beautifully onto the idea of these memory platforms. Now, when we're talking about memory platforms, what we're really talking about here is dedicating some time in your classroom for this retrieval practice. So actually making sure that it becomes part and parcel of your lesson planning techniques, okay? So what we need to do is ensure that we're not neglecting it. We're not just going, oh, we don't have time for that, we're not going to do that bit, because it is one of the best ways for students to retain information in the long term. So how do we do this? Well, when you're actually thinking about your lesson, obviously you've got all your nice new content, you've put into practice all the other bits we've talked about in our videos, but you're also ensuring that somewhere in there is going to be a little bit of a recap on some facts that they should already know, okay? Now, not only does this mean that we're getting them to think about it, but if you're clever, you can also think that, hold on, the topic I'm teaching right now has a beautiful link to this earlier work I did. So I'm going to put a lot of retrieval questions about that earlier topic. And then we're starting to build those links together in the work. So what we're actually helping our students to do is one of those things they do struggle with, tying together all of these individual little ideas into that whole big picture of whatever the concept is we're really teaching. Now, quite often people think, right, okay, every lesson I shall start with these questions. And that's not wrong, but it doesn't have to always be at the start. So obviously it's a dead easy thing to do. Put up some retrieval questions on that first slide that you've got in the room. So the first thing they're going to do is they're getting themselves settled down is that memory practice. Brilliant. It does work. I'm not saying don't do that, people. But it doesn't just have to be at the start of a lesson. If you've been teaching a little bit and think, hold on, this little slide here that I've just talked about, this little aspect links beautifully back to something previous, why not put a few retrieval questions in there? It's completely up to you as to where it goes. It doesn't just have to be a starter activity of old. One thing we do need to be able to do though is embed it into our curricular time on a regular basis. So it's not just a one-hit wonder here, people. We're looking for this sustained practice of getting them to think back, of making them actually retrieve this information from the depths of their memories. So different ways that this could actually come about in your lessons, or perhaps not in your lessons. Give them a homework task. Set them a bunch of retrieval questions as a homework task. Obviously the good old recall quiz, that is quite a popular one there. We could get students to actually test each other. Now obviously this works brilliantly if they've created their own little flashcards, or if you've got sets of pre-prepared flashcards, they can actually quiz each other on that one. And then we've also got those reflective tasks where they're able to review their learning but not using their books. So how often is it that we give them an MDT task and say, oh yeah, just flick straight back in your book? They're not actually having that struggle part where they're really searching their memory to try to dig out that information first. So sometimes actually getting them to review on their learning without looking back in their notes first of all is going to help them in the long term. So those are just a few suggestions, not an exhaustive list by any means, but hopefully something to get you started on getting that regular retrieval practice built into your lessons. And of course, don't forget, put your initials into the comments below so that you can be entered in for our termly little draw for the department goodies. And if you have any comments that you would like to share with everyone else, of course you are welcome to do so, and I'll publish them on our channel.